And welcome to TikTok Live, like it says. Hi there. Welcome to my TikTok, folks, here at 8 o'clock on a Thursday evening on the East Coast. So I am really here to waste some time tonight, but especially to waste other people's time as well. Oh, one thing I can see I forgot. I somehow forgot to plug in the power cord here. I'm sorry, so that way my phone doesn't drain. Sorry about that. Anyway, I guess, take two. Hi there. I am here to waste people's time tonight, largely because, well, I just felt fed up with all of the usual crap taking place on TikTok Live. TikTok Live, as you know, has become something of a barren wasteland lately, full of worthless political arguments. I mean, they're not debates, they're just arguments. Basically, people getting on TikTok Live to shout at each other about all of the usual subjects, and I don't even have to say what they are because you're here on TikTok Live and you know what they are. Pretty much every other video or more that you see now when you go on TikTok Live, it's either some stupid political subject or a stupid political subject, the other political subject that is, or a stupid religious subject, and occasionally somebody just playing a game or otherwise hanging out. So I thought, just for the heck of it, again, I got sick and tired of it tonight, and I decided to do something about it. Namely, I'm going to talk about vintage cast iron frying pans. How about that? Largely because it's not politics, and I thought I might as well spend some time, just waste some time, talking about a subject here on TikTok Live that is not politics, especially since it's a hobby that I very much enjoy, and there is a lot of stuff to talk about, actually, especially since I'm not here to sell anything. I'm turned off the gifts, and I'm not asking for gifts either. I'm just spending a little time really talking, I guess. And if folks are interested, well, feel free to step on by. I would like to say, if nothing else, besides the fact that I have this obsession here with cast iron frying pans, and I could go on and say why, but I should also point out, that all of this stuff here is stuff that you very well have in your kitchen right now. And that might be something interesting. If you go to your kitchen and pull out a frying pan that's on the that you have on the stove or in a cabinet or something, especially if it's a cast iron frying pan, it may very well be something that you have a lot of history about. Yeah, exactly. Hello, Deb. Yes, you have a few. Nice to see you here as well. So, but yeah, I mean, there's really so much to talk about with this subject. I mean, if you know anything at all, especially with the way cast iron has been making a big comeback over the past decade or so, then you know very well that this has really become a lot more popular than it used to be, and that a lot of these things really aren't considered to be just frying pans anymore. After all, you always see all of the celebrity chefs now. We're talking anybody from Gordon Ramsay, Guy Fieri, the people on pretty much everybody on the Food Network, and pretty much anybody else really who has a cooking show these days. Whether it's on TV or on YouTube or on TikTok, they're all talking about cooking in cast iron, and for a good reason. There's just something about cast iron really that has such an, I don't know what you could call it, almost mystical attraction to it. I mean, what's the big deal about an old frying pan that you can't get from a frying pan that you buy at Wally World or at the dollar store or something? But there we go. So we've already got, hello Rhonda, saying already that you prefer Erie or Griswold. So yeah, that's exactly what I mean. There's been an attraction to cast iron in particular that really seems to appeal than just about any other kind of cookware. It could very well be the history behind these pans. Namely, and I'm not just talking about the boring stuff, the stuff that geeks like me are interested in. Like the fact, for instance, that this is a Birmingham stove and range number 8 size pan that was probably made between the 1960s and the 1970s. I'm thinking more like the simple stuff, like the fact that that cast iron pan that you have in your kitchen right now could very well have come from your grandmother or your great grandmother. It always seems to be our great grandmothers, though. You know, it's not like our parents most often. Of course, that's because, well, again, over the past, the last half of the 20th century, cast iron kind of like fell out of favor, I guess you could say, because, kitchens changed, here in the U.S. and all over the world, so that people were cooking more in non-stick pans than old-fashioned cast iron. And of course, it's gotten to the point where a lot of people just simply don't cook at all these days. Now, I'm not here to shame or blame anyone for that. That's how things have turned out. But nonetheless, there are still those of us who enjoy cooking. I mean, I only learned how to cook myself only about 12 or 13 years ago, and yet here I am, I'm over 50 years old. Yeah, I could not cook for most of my life, but then I caught the cooking bug, and pretty much at the same time, I caught the cast iron bug, largely because it was cooking in a cast iron pan that I found to be so much fun, and it just kind of grew from there. So people are finding out why their ancestors' food was so good. Yes, exactly. I mean, that's the thing. And as I said, this has all become so popular again over the past decade or so. It's cool now. Yeah, that's a word, even though that really sounds so nerdy. Oh, it's cool now to cook in cast iron. But yeah, it certainly is. So more so than it was like maybe 10 years ago. Nonetheless, well, if so, then great. I'm certainly enjoying it, and why not? Maybe it's part of the natural craze that's also gripped our country lately. How people are going more for natural stuff as opposed to the prepackaged processed stuff that they sell at the store. On the other hand, quite a lot of my cooking is still the store-bought stuff. I'm not ashamed to say that either. And that really gets into a whole nother subject as well. Hello, Trish. Cast iron is awesome, yes. And I have a wood stove. Nice, and congratulations on still having a wood stove. So I never had that chance to have one of those. I'm a typical American who grew up in the late 20th century, meaning that of course, I've only been able to cook on an electric stove for like the past 11 years or so, and it was only last summer when I moved to my new home that I actually had the chance to cook in gas for the first time. And yeah, I've certainly been enjoying it. But anyway, that's really, as I said, really kind of like the subject here. And again, I'll point out that, if you go to your kitchen, as I said, and if you pull out that heavy frying pan off the stove or off the or out of a cabinet or the like, chances are it could very well be one of these. I am not claiming to have every single piece of cast iron ever made. No way. I do not have a collection like that. But there are, of course, some brands of cast iron that are a lot more popular than others. And again, that's why, as I said, there's a good chance that, for instance, you might have a pan that looks like this in your kitchen right now. It's not guaranteed, but I bet a lot of you probably have a pan with a marking just like this. And I should also say this comes from a company that went out of business in the 1990s. So no, I'm not trying to sell this, and I'm not working for that company either. The company was that made these particular pans, for instance, was a company called Birmingham Stove and Range, and they were, of course, in Birmingham, Alabama. They were in Birmingham, Alabama for almost the entire 20th century, 1905 to, 1993. They made an enormous number of frying pans and chicken fryers and deep Dutch ovens and camp gear and cornbread pans. They made a huge amount of cast iron over the 20th century, and they went out of business, but believe me, because they made such a huge amount of frying pans out there, that's why you can find these pans everywhere. For instance, you can find them at flea markets. You can find them, of course, at antique stores. You could probably find them at yard sales or maybe even in junk piles. There are people who go to, as you know, there are people who go to scrap yards looking for junk and cast iron and the like, and there's a good chance that you could find a pan that looks like this out there too, just because they made so many of them. So that's really what I'm saying, is that there's a good chance this pan could be in your kitchen right now. And I am not going to say that you're going to strike it rich and you can sell this pan for a lot of money, because no, especially because they made so many of them, it's not really, almost not worth the effort to try to sell one of these things. I would rather you use these pans and just get a lot of enjoyment out of them. But again, if you're not sure where that particular pan comes from, I will say again, this particular one here was made by Birmingham Stove and Range in Alabama. This is from a series they had made called Century Cookware, and this was really from the late 1960s up until the late 1980s, arguably the early 1990s. So if you have a pan that looks like this, then that's roughly how old it is. Anywhere from, again, from the 1960s to the 1980s it was made. So, which means if you have somebody who says, but my great-grandmother passed down this frying pan to me, well, it's possible that she got that pan late in her life, because that is pretty much known when these things were made. So, oh, and yours was Red Mountain. Oh, good. See, and I can see there are some people here who already know about BSR too. So, yeah, in fact, let me take a moment, I guess, and let's pull out another kind of pan from that company, shall we? Which I believe I have right here. Here it is. Whoops, dropped something. Oh, well, get this back up here now. Anyway, yeah, somebody talked about Red Mountain, and here is one right here, in fact. This particular one was also made by Birmingham Stove and Range, and it was indeed their Red Mountain series, which they made all the way from the 1930s all the way up to the 1960s, in fact. And that's a long period of time. And so, yeah, they made a lot of frying pans that have this kind of a mark here on the bottom. This means that this is a size number 3 pan, and that, of course, it was made with a mold ID number, you know, A, B, and C. So this one happened to be in mold number letter G. Which doesn't mean much now, except that, again, it helped them to identify when they made it. But as I said, there is probably a good possibility that any number of people might have one or more of these kind of pans in their kitchen right now. And that's all I'm trying to do tonight. I'm just looking to point these things out and maybe give you a little bit more information that you might not know about these frying pans you have in your kitchen. I say again, I'm not trying to sell anything. If anything, I guess I'd like to promote my TikTok channel, of course, and my YouTube channel, too. I have a channel called Cast Iron Chaos. So, circa of the Red Mountain. Yes, the Birmingham area does, in fact, have an area that they call the Red Mountain, and that was because of the reddish color of the, I'm not sure if it was actually the ground or just the iron ore that was made in those days. And they did indeed call these things Red Mountain just because of that. And so, like I said, they went from the, technically, actually, they went from the 30s to the 50s. And then in the 50s, they renamed their entire line from Red Mountain to Century Cookware. However, they did not change the design of this pan for another 10 years or so, till the 1960s. And there's really no way to tell, give an exact year when this pan was made. It could have been made anywhere from the 1930s all the way to the 1960s. So most people who see this just assume it's the earlier one, so they call it a Red Mountain pan. But yeah, this is just one of, again, these are just a couple of the many kinds of cast iron pans that are out there. And yeah, you can get into details about collecting cast iron and selling cast iron the way the antique malls do. And there are some people here on TikTok, in fact, who are doing a really good job cleaning up and promoting old cast iron. I'm sure some of you probably already know about Cast Iron Chris, for instance. I've chatted with him once or twice myself. So yeah, I mean, he's an example, you know, of one of these people who are cashing in on the cast iron renaissance we're having. More power to him. I don't have any problem at all with that. And yeah, he has, again, many examples of many kinds of pans out there of, well, just that. Some of which could, yet again, be in your kitchen right now. Not just these unnamed ones, but some of the more famous names as well. Like, here's a name, anybody who knows anything at all about cast iron, they know this name, of course. And that, of course, is Griswold. It's like, this is like the Rolls Royce of vintage cast iron as far as they're concerned, as far as antique vendors are concerned these days. If you have a pan with this marking on the bottom, you could very well sell it for some money. Not enough to retire on, though they're certainly trying, I will say that. This, for instance, is a 6-inch number 3 sized Griswold skillet. It's a slant logo, as they say, which means it was actually made around the 1910s, so this pan is more than 100 years old. Right now, at this moment, if I went to an antique mall, some dealer would probably want to buy this for me. They would probably offer me a low price of, I don't know, $30 or $40 for this little pan. At which point, then they would try to flip it, and they would definitely put it on their out there for sale for a price of at least double that. We're talking like maybe $60 or $70 for this tiny little frying pan. And that, of course, is how the collector's market goes. Anybody who collects anything, you know how the collector's market goes. Whether it's frying pans or coins or World War II memorabilia or baseball cards or Magic or Pokemon cards, you know how the collector's market goes, and I probably don't even have to get into that. But basically, yeah, Griswold is one of those names in the cast iron world that is considered to be very collectible. I'm pleased to own several Griswold pans, most of which I actually managed to get at good bargains. But I still use this regularly, and I'm quite happy about that. Hello, Diddy Mama, you have about 300 pieces. Oh yeah. You know what that means? You have cast ironitis. That's what it means. Yeah, I did a series of TikTok videos back around last Christmas, and I think they're still circulating as well, that tell you about, you might have cast ironitis, for instance. If, for instance, if your oven is full of cast iron pans and you have to empty out the oven anytime at all you use it, you might have cast ironitis. If you have a collection like this, and this is small compared to your collection, you might have cast ironitis. If your idea of having fun is going to flea markets and junkyards and digging through piles of rusty, crusty, dirty pans, you might have cast ironitis. You get the idea. So yes, you do, and you know how it is. But as well, yeah, I have a cast iron kitchen on my porch. Well, again, congratulations. Post a couple of TikTok videos of it. I'm sure a lot of people would love to see that. I'd love to see it myself as well. What's your channel website name to learn more about cast iron? Well, my TikTok is called Cast Iron Chaos. I have a YouTube channel called Cast Iron Chaos. I have a website called Cast Iron Chaos. I think you get the idea. It's really the domain name I have is based on the nickname I've used online for the past 30 going on 40 years, Modemac, M-O-D-E-M-A-C. It's a nickname I chose for myself, and I've always liked it, and I still use it. And that is the domain name that I use. But I know it's easier to simply look up Cast Iron Chaos. So, and you should be able to find me in that way with no trouble at all. I've been online. I've had a presence online since the 1980s, and I've been using the name Cast Iron Chaos for going on about the past 12 or 13 years now. So it's enough to get me into YouTube, I'll say that much, or into Google rather. So yes, and of course mine, it's actually a small part of the cast iron community. There are sites out there much bigger than mine that have a lot to do with cast iron. As I mentioned already, here on TikTok, we've got Cast Iron Chris, who has something like 250,000 followers here. Good grief. The guy is really making a name for himself. So, and I'm sure you've probably already seen his videos. In fact, if you do anything at all with these cast iron frying pans here on TikTok, then you've probably seen Cast Iron Chris. So, but anyway, that's really, actually I want to put this over here. OCD? No, not at all. I don't know what you're talking about. But yeah, as I said, I really am here again tonight, really, just to try to encourage folks to give you all a little curiosity to head into your kitchen, because if you've got a frying pan in your kitchen, it may very well be something vintage, something special that was passed down to you by your grandmother or great-grandmother. And I'm simply asking you to use it with pride. I'm not asking you to sell that pan unless you want to. I would rather people use their cast iron because, you know, again, you get this great sense of history from cooking one of these things. I mean, what can you say? Like with that Griswold pan, for instance, you know, just the idea that I'm cooking in an antique that's over 100 years old, and you can think of all the meals that were cooked in that, and maybe it sounds kind of sappy or dumb, but I like the sensation, I'll say that. What is your favorite cast iron? Oh, that's really hard to say because it really depends on what I'm doing. I have a number 8 size Birmingham Stove and Range Red Mountain pan. Let me get that one right now, for instance. In fact, let me get 2 pans. Okay, there we go. You asked about my favorites. Probably one of my most favorite kitchen users is yet another Red Mountain pan, and this is a size 8, which is pretty much the standard size really for cast iron. And this is indeed a Red Mountain pan that I've had now for more than 10 years, and this is likely my go-to when I want to cook almost anything on the stove, but there are exceptions to that. I could, on the other hand, talk about the very first cast iron pan I owned, which is just a little bit more than 20 years old. I do not have any cast iron that was passed down to me by my grandmother, unfortunately. This was my first cast iron pan. I received this in 1992 as a wedding present, in fact. And yeah, if you look at the logo on this pan, which no, they're not paying me to do, but you know, it's like, gee, I'm wondering where the guy bought this pan when he gave it to us as a wedding present. So yeah, pretty obvious. But especially for that reason, I like to call this my redneck pan. Anyway, this was the very first cast iron pan that I ever owned, and it was cooking in this pan that really made me catch the bug, the cooking bug and also the cast iron bug. And I just moved out from there. And this, of course, is a modern-day Lodge cast iron pan. And I love Lodge. I love modern-day Lodge pans. There's nothing wrong with them at all, despite what some people seem to be saying here on TikTok. Because, yeah, I can get into some of the controversy, so-called controversy that they talk about when they talk about cast iron pans, pretty much not just on TikTok but just about anywhere. Usually what is said is that modern day cast iron is not so great and vintage cast iron is so much better. I say no, and I say modern day cast iron is different. It changed over the years. I mean, this is a great pan. I still use this pan regularly, even though it's only 20 years old and not 120 years old. They also say, and it's also true, of course, that Lodge cast iron has more of a rough surface than the vintage pans, which they ground down smooth. And it is true that the older pans do feel nice for cooking with their glass smooth surfaces. But yeah, exactly. Nothing wrong with Lodge. Exactly. You could cook just fine with a typical Lodge cast iron pan that you bought at Wally World or anywhere like that. You can do nonstick cooking in a modern day Lodge pan because yes, the rough surface, there's There is a very slight difference, I will say this, between the vintage and the modern, but it's not enough to keep you from cooking in it. And as I said, especially because this is the first cast iron pan that I ever owned and used, it still is this is going to have sentimental value to me, and I'm not going to stop using it. Besides, I have to admit, even for collecting anyway, that's when you can get into the modern day collector's market, because Lodge really has been catering to that. You know, Lodge has been producing some really nice pans with fancy designs on them that, here's one for instance. Here it is. That are really meant to appeal to collectors as well as people who cook. I mean, what can you say, for instance, about a pan that looks like this? They're made in America pan, for instance, and this one was made in 2018. So, this is a really great pan, and I've cooked quite a lot in this pan. But you have to admit, and I certainly got this because of the design on the bottom. I mean, after all, it's Memorial Day weekend starting tomorrow. For some people, it started tonight, in fact. And it's really, cooking in a pan that looks like this on Memorial Day weekend, it's really, a lot of people, including me, would not resist the temptation to break out this pan, especially for Memorial Day. So, even though, again, this is really just made for the collector's market, you know, this is not going to cook any better than that other Lodge pan that I showed, or that BSR pan. So, don't you have that one that you promised to a godchild? Yes, as a matter of fact, it wasn't this one. I got 2 of these back in 2018. One I kept because I wanted to keep it, and the other one, the same Made in America pan, I did in fact give to my godson, who was born that year in 2018. So that's true. So, well, since you know that, obviously you've been following me on YouTube and Facebook, and well, thank you very much. After all, I publish that stuff for people to watch and read, so thank you very much for watching it. But yes, there is a big collector's market for cast iron, not just vintage cast iron, but modern cast iron, for things like this, for instance. Because, as I said, that's just how the modern day market is going. Obviously they do things like this especially so that it will sell better. That's really the bottom line. They're a business. What can you say? They do this especially to appeal to people and make them buy it, or encourage them to buy it. And why not? Because again, welcome to America. That's pretty much how capitalism works. So I'm not ashamed, and I'm quite proud to own this Made in America pan, for instance, and I'm certainly going to be using it this weekend. My mom's mom had a frying pan, and now I have it. Well, congratulations on that. If you look at the bottom, the underside of that pan, are there any markings on that? Because that can be used to identify that pan and see where it is. I have the Lady Liberty, the Buffalo Nickel, and the Eagle, and I love them all. Yes, exactly. And that's when we get into first world problems. Oh boy, it's time for me to make supper. Which cast iron pan I'm going to make it in? Am I going to make it in the Lady Liberty, the Buffalo Nickel, or the Eagle skillet? That's definitely first world problems. And yeah, I certainly have no shortage of those kind of first world problems. You can certainly see that. So, well, what can I say? I'm a nerd, and I'm proud of it, and I don't deny that. And I like sharing this information because it's fun. Because why not? So. I love that pan, and needless, and something stays in my home and will not go anywhere. Well, yeah, there is that too. And I suppose that's one point as well. Another thing that people in the cast iron community say usually, and that is they say to stay away from cheap Asian and Chinese made frying pans. And I disagree with that for precisely that reason. Because as you say, if you go out on a camping trip, you're not going to want to take your precious heirloom cast iron pans out on that camping trip where they could be broken or stolen or lost or who knows what. that's when it's time to get a cheaper disposable pan, like the Ozark Trail pans that they sell at Walmart, for instance. So that's one reason why I'm not ashamed to own Asian-made cast iron either. And here, yet again, let's break something out, shall we? Here's one. And here's another. Here are a couple of Asian-made cast iron pans made in Asia that I am very glad to have in my collection. This one is an interesting one here. It was indeed made in China. It has a big logo on the back that says Basic, and it says right there, made in China, so it's certainly not hiding anything. But I like the design of this pan. This is an unusual shaped pan. It's quite different. It's so unusual. I could see this thing being used as a movie prop, for instance, you know, in a science fiction or even a fantasy movie, just because it's so different. And that's the reason why I got this, especially just because I like the design. I have to admit that. On the other hand, here's an Asian-made pan that some folks may know about. This is one of those Star Wars cast iron pans that they sell at Walmart, that they've been selling at Walmart for the past 3 years now. Each year at Walmart, as you know, they have those cheap cookie skillets, those that they sell during the Christmas season. And for the last 3 years, they've been selling Star Wars cast iron pans. And yeah, I've been collecting those too. So even though I have not seen many episodes of The Mandalorian, nonetheless, this is a made in Asia cast iron pan. So, and that just because it's made in Asia didn't stop me from getting this thing, and didn't stop a lot of people from getting these things. So, Longbow just got racks, what is it saying here? Racks of these at Costco and some S-hooks. Oh, yeah. I see. You're talking about building a rack like this. And yeah, I certainly needed a rack like this, unfortunately, or fortunately, if you prefer, just to display my collection here, because, you know, that way, you know, I can show it off. And also, it makes it much more convenient to store it as well. Got any Wagner or Griswold? Well, actually, yes. As I showed a few minutes ago, here is a number 3 slant logo Griswold. And let me see if you'll be kind enough to hold tight for a second. Let's dig this one out. Move this out of the way for the moment. Here it is. And how about this? Oh man, I gotta clean the bottom of this. How about a Griswold number 14? Large logo, no less. So, yeah, I think I have a couple of Griswold. So, yeah, these number 14 pans are really... There's a story behind every one of these, and I am glad to own them as well. Phew, well, okay, now I've got to take a second to put this down and put it back. So don't mind me grunting and groaning. That's one of the consequences of owning all of this heavy stuff. So to answer your question, yes. I have a few Griswold pieces in my collection. And I'm not pretending to be modest by saying I have a few. I mean, I have a few. The majority of my pans are almost certainly vintage Birmingham Stove and Range and modern day Lodge. Those two probably take up about 2/3 of my entire collection. I have some Griswold. I have a few Wagner. A few other brands as well, but the majority of my collection is BSR and Lodge, because I try to make sure all my pans are users, not so much collectors. And yes, I do in fact cook with these Griswold pans as well. Let me pull out another one in fact. Here is one as well. A Griswold small logo nonetheless. number 6 size. And this one probably dates to the 1940s to 1950s or so. It's not the groove handle small logo Griswold, I'm afraid. It just has a standard handle to it. So my understanding is those groove handles specifically were made in the later 1950s. So, and this is not one of them. What's the oldest piece you have? The oldest piece I have is sitting over here, and that is my cauldron. And I'm not kidding when I call it a cauldron. It's a 15-gallon cast iron cauldron from the 1800s. And I know it's from the 1800s because it was made by the Savory Company of Philadelphia. It has the manufacturer logo printed not printed. It's right there on the side of that big, huge pot. It's a 15-gallon cauldron. So that was a once-in-a-lifetime type of deal that I ended up scoring. It was one of those things that it was actually at a price that I could afford when I found it that day. And I just knew that if I walked away and passed up that deal, I would be kicking myself for the rest of my life. And so I ended up making the investment, and now as a result, I have myself a huge cast iron cauldron. And that is definitely my oldest pan. I have a couple of gate marked skillets from the 1800s as well. So yeah, I know. Tell me about it. Yes, I do. In fact, I do have an Erie. I have one Erie, number 8, and it's way over there in the back, so which I actually also bring out on several occasions. Yeah, got any nice chicken fryers? I have 2 of them. I have an unmarked Wagner chicken fryer and a Birmingham stove and range chicken fryer. So yes, yeah, I do have some of those. Of course, then you get into the question, why do I need all of these things? Especially, why do I need 2 chicken fryers? Especially since I have several Dutch ovens and a few deep fryers as well. You know, they call them oval roasters these days. Thoughts on Lodge? I love Lodge. I love modern day Lodge. I've got a large number of modern day Lodge. Large Lodge. I've got quite a few modern day Lodge, and I cook with them all the time. And I'm quite happy with it. I love modern day cast iron. I love vintage cast iron. I love it all. But seriously, I'm thinking there is a difference between modern day and vintage cast iron. I don't think vintage cast iron is better than modern day cast iron. I think it's different. So, cast iron makes you buy many skillets. Yes, it does. It makes you buy too many skillets. And one of the reasons why I even started my YouTube channel was especially so that I would have an excuse to rotate through my collection and try to use as many of these pans as possible. So, and so far, I hope I've been doing a somewhat decent job of it. So, that way I get to show off things. Let me see. Let me pull out something else here, for instance. Like, how about modern day Lodge, for instance? 20th anniversary of the National Cornbread Festival. So this pan is already about 5 years old or so. This is a number 5 size, or in other words, an 8-inch cast iron skillet. And yes, I do cook with it as well as use it as a display piece. Likewise, also here in the collection, somebody talked about Wagner. Here is a Wagner number 4. And you can tell this is an older Wagner because it still has a heat ring on the bottom. So this would most likely be, I would guess, 1910s or 1920s to the 1930s or so. And yeah, I'm quite happy to use this one as well. So there are people with collections much bigger than mine in that they have the entire series of something or another. Like there's somebody who could show you a full line of Griswolds, for instance, number 3 all the way to number 14. I can't do that. I have not been quite that obsessed, except maybe when it comes to Birmingham stove and range. Who knows? If it's pitted horribly, then leave it. Well, there is that. Burton, does this say garage sale? Oh, garage sale iron is great. I'm guessing you're meaning finding iron at garage sales, and yeah, that's true. I've gotten some really good deals at garage sales too. I certainly won't deny that. I believe it was at a garage sale, in fact, that I got that Century Birmingham stove and range, the one that you saw right there. So yeah, I'm quite happy with it. Yeah. Are you on our cast iron? Well, yes, I posted several times on Reddit. So yes, I have seen that. Antique stores can be a steal as well. Well, antique stores can be tricky. As everybody knows who knows anything about antique stores, there are 3 rules for antique stores. Old is good, big is good, old and big are better. Actually, there's a fourth rule to that as well. Namely, if the manufacturer's logo is there, then you've struck gold. That's one reason why Griswold and Wagner are so popular at antique stores. All they have to do is see the Griswold name and they stick a high price on it. What is it? I don't care. It's a Griswold. Stick a high price on it. But it's got a crack. It's bent in half because it went through a house fire. I don't care. It's a Griswold. Stick a high price on it. And if I'm exaggerating, I'm only exaggerating very slightly, I think. So, yeah, that is another reason why I like Birmingham Stove and Range, because when they went out of business, BSR was largely forgotten until they were rediscovered by the internet only within like the last 10, 15 years or so. Because they never put their name on their pans. They were anonymous, essentially. They made tons and tons of frying pans, sold them all across the country. Almost nobody knew who made them because they didn't have the manufacturer logo on them. And then again, they went out of business in 1993, and that seemed to be the end of it. And then here we go again. This cast iron renaissance started over the past decade or so when we discovered all of these BSR pans, and there was this mystery to them. So it's a sense of history and mystery to them. That plus the fact that they're excellent users in the kitchen. And that might be the reason why BSR is probably my favorite vintage makers here. If I go into an antique store, I go to multi-vendor shops and look under stuff for dusty and scratches. Exactly, that's the point. The stuff that's hanging on the wall with the label, with the sales price label prominently displayed, is almost always overpriced. The real trick, as you said, is to go searching through dusty bins of rusty junk. Now, a lot of times, that's where a lot of the good bargains can be found. That's why I guess flea markets and garage sales are so popular as far as finding cast iron is concerned. If someone threw their cast iron out at the dump, could be trusted after it was ground or wired wheeled. Well, that's true too. There is that possibility, yes. If you find something in a junk heap, you definitely do need to check it out and test it. Who knows what could have happened? It could be cracked. It could have been used to melt lead, unfortunately, or even painted with lead paint. So if you have a reason to be suspicious, it probably is still necessary and may always be necessary to test an old cast iron pan for lead if you don't know where it came from and if it looks suspicious. Some people test every single pan that they find for lead. Good for them. I'm not quite like that. I admit, maybe I'm too trusting, but I would generally check a pan for lead if I had reason to be suspicious. Granted, there are reasons to be suspicious, and I have several times tested my pans for lead. I've never found lead on any of my cast iron. I did find lead on my vintage Pyrex glassware. So, yeah, that kind of scared me right there and then. Why would anybody throw out the cast iron? Anything have a Dutch oven? I have a griddle. I have several Dutch ovens, in fact. But why would you throw out cast iron? Well, welcome to the 21st century, where a lot of people simply don't cook. And again, I'm not really trying to shame anybody. I'm just stating that that's the case for quite a few people. People today may have inherited their grandmother's old cast iron and then put it in the back of a drawer for like a decade or so and finally decided to sell it because it was just gathering dust. Or people get those Star Wars Walmart cookie skillets for Christmas. They try cookie, or even somebody gives them a cast iron pan for Christmas. They give them a nice large pan that they for Christmas. They cook it in it once or twice and, oh, everything is sticking in this. I can't cook in this. And so yet again, they stick it in the back of a drawer for a couple of months, then finally pull it out and sell it at their yard sale because they're not going to have any use for it. I'm going to just get rid of that old frying pan. So there are a couple of reasons why people get rid of cast iron, just because that's the society we live in. And that could be another discussion altogether, and I'm not interested in those kind of discussions because we know exactly where that road would lead. The last one from the last one from the scrapyard was a large chef's skillet. Nice. Someone burned something on it and threw it out. Yes, exactly, because really they didn't know what they were doing. But if you know how to clean up old cast iron, then there you go. You got yourself a bargain. And when it comes to cleaning cast iron, my favorite method is the lye tank. I've got a big, huge barrel in my garage. I've got like about 20 or 30 gallons of lye in it. And at this moment, I probably have 7 or 8 cast iron pans soaking in that lye, which I'm going to clean up one of these days. So yeah, I love my lye tank for that reason. You can just toss an old piece of cast iron in there, set it, and forget it. And a couple of months later, pull it out and clean it up, and it's just as good as new. I love my Martin stove and range cast iron. Still looking for a 9 and a 12 hamburger logo. Good luck. Yeah, that's how the vintage hunt goes, as you know. And you know exactly when you're going to find it. You're going to find it when you're not looking for it. That's when you're going to find it. It's just suddenly going to jump out at you, and you're going to go, huh! And then, of course, you might be able to grab it, or, well, maybe not. That's how the hunt goes. I have 4 E-tanks and 3 lye tanks and about 50 pieces. Oh, man. You must be doing this as a professional, then. I'm a hobbyist, and I admit that. And if you're doing this as a professional, well, again, more power to you. Yeah. Doesn't lye get rid of lead too? Unfortunately, no, it doesn't. It doesn't work like that. Lead seems to bond pretty well with cast iron, to the point where if a pan has lead contamination, it's essentially considered to be permanent. And I would advise someone that if a pan tests positive for lead, or you know it was voted or used to melt lead, never, ever cook in that pan ever again. Either mark that pan as in some way or another as having lead, or simply destroy it. Smash it with a hammer, crack it, and so that it can never be used for cooking. The thing about lead is this. Also it has to do with the way cast iron works and how seasoning sticks to cast iron. Cast iron is not porous. And when they talk about pores in the surface of the metal that the seasoning sticks to, what they're talking about, of course, are those microscopic cracks and fissures and those little imperfections in the surface of the pan. Every pan has those. And that's how the seasoning sticks. It gets into those little crevices. And when lead melts, that can do the same thing too. And there's no guarantee that if you try getting rid of the lead in a pan by heating it up in a fire or something, there's no guarantee you're going to get rid of all of it. And that's why lead contamination can be considered to be permanent in a cast iron pan. And unfortunately, that's a fact of life. There are a lot of people who do that. There are a lot of videos on TikTok and on YouTube of people even today who are using cast iron pans to melt lead. Well, it's their cast iron, and they can do whatever they want with it. And that's fine for them. I'm not going to say, no, don't do that, because it's not mine, it's theirs. Unfortunately, there is the risk that those pans could end up getting out there, into the wild, where somebody like you or me could find it at a flea market. Which is why we have to be careful. That, unfortunately, is one of the dangers of the hunt. There are some dangers, and not just with cast iron, but with other things too. On the other hand, well, let's try this. And here's where I get to sound like a nerd again. You know what the best way to fight this kind of danger is? With information. Namely, if you know about lead contamination and lead being used to melt cast iron pans, and if you're aware of it, then you can keep an eye out for it. You don't have to be paranoid, but it's something to consider. And you can be that much safer that way, because I have seen people on Facebook and on YouTube and whatnot showing off this really wonderful pan this really wonderful cooking pot that they found. There's a video on YouTube, in fact, I saw of someone who actually unburied this cast iron pot out of the ground, and she polished it up and was so proud of it, and it turned out to be a lead smelting pot. I made a point, in fact, of posting a TikTok video comment on her video on that, and I told her that, it's like, yeah, you did a nice job cleaning up that pot, but please be aware that is a lead smelter. That was used for melting lead, which means you can use it for display, you can use it for your ritual, which I guess is what she was using it for, but please do not ever cook food in that pan, because, again, the lead is there and it's permanent. How do you know if it has lead in a used one? Well, most of the time, I can't say every single time, because, there are exceptions, but most of the time, lead residue is very obvious. When you melt lead in a cast iron pan, it gives it this color, and this yellowish, grayish, whitish color that I personally think is an ugly shade of yellow. And I'm not saying it because it's lead. I honestly think it's just that. It's an unpleasant yellowish type of color to it. So that can make it very easy to spot. It is possible that you might mistake something for lead, in which case then you test it for lead and find out whether or not it actually has lead. So most of the time, lead contamination is pretty obvious, at least. So that's something. Amazon sells them, but tested a few times to make sure. Those lead tests out there, as far as I can tell, are generally very, very accurate. I have used those 3M tests that you get from Lowe's and Home Depot. The big disadvantage of those things is they're expensive, but they are very reliable. I've looked at the reviews, the customer reviews of those 3M lead paint tests. None of them ever say that the tests were inaccurate. All of the complaints on the comments about those tests was the fact that they were messy, that they got broken, or that they did not distribute, or they actually did not produce the chemicals they were supposed to produce. Shoddy packaging, that kind of thing. None of those reviews of those 3M lead paint tests have ever said the test is inaccurate. So in that respect, I would call it a pretty reliable test. So for whatever that's worth. Why do they melt lead? Because they can. Because it's easy. Because there are some hobbies and in professions as well that melting lead is a very efficient and cost-effective way of doing things. Fishing, for instance. People use cast iron pans to melt lead and make weights, sinkers, they call them. I haven't fished since I was like about 5 or 6 years old. I don't know all the terms in fishing, but that's one. But they're very popular, and that's why there is a chance if you find an old cast iron muffin pan out there in the wild, you might need to test it because it was used for melting lead. I've seen TikTok videos of this guy who takes his son to the shooting range, when they go shooting their guns, the shooting range. And they regularly go around and pick up a whole bunch of used shot, spent bullets and the like. And they gather them all together and they melt it in their cast iron pan. And just that, they purify it and scrape it off, and they get some really good lead from that. They get some good lead ingots from that. Likewise as well, other hobbyists, they melt lead to make bullets, cheap and easy bullets. So there are many reasons for people to melt lead, and I'm not going to fault them for that. They have their reasons for that. Heck, there are people, plumbers and metal workers. They use lead, and so in which case then they have reasons to melt lead. So yes, there are reasons for it. And it is a fact that cast iron is good at melting lead. It is good for it, unfortunately. So the danger of lead is out there. On the plus side, it's usually pretty easy to spot, so I feel the danger of lead is small. Not impossible, but small. Meaning that if you find at any flea market, if you find an old cast iron pan, I think the chances of that particular cast iron pan having lead would be very, very small, but not impossible. So, and that's really where it becomes a judgment call, and I can't speak for you on that. Hello, Huey Bryan as well. So, and that, I guess, is what I have to say about the subject of lead and cast iron. It's there. One thing I will also say about lead and cast iron. Asian and Chinese-made cast iron. Those pans that they make in Asia and ship out here and sell them all over the place. At Walmart, at Target, at Family Dollar. Those cast iron pans do not have lead in them. There are very popular and rumors that have been going for decades. I wouldn't trust that Chinese cast iron pan there. It probably has lead in it. It probably was made from melted uranium and stuff like that. And actually, I will have to say, no, that is not true. Cast iron is a very simple process. They've been doing it for thousands of years. It was invented in China, in fact. Something like 50 BC or something like that. They've been doing it for thousands of years. There's nothing secret about that. It's very easy to get the slag out of cast iron. And for that reason, cast iron in particular, made in China, I will say that is safe. And I will agree with everybody as well. The problem with China is the politics. And yes, about the shoddy products. And the electronics from China that's really defective and exploding and has spyware in it. And the food and the medicines from China that is faulty and could be poisonous. And the toys from China that could have lead in them. I agree with all of that. Yes, that can be the case. See, but cast iron in particular is safe just because it's so cheap and easy to make. It would be more expensive to put lead in cast iron, in fact. So just because it's so cheap and easy, cast iron made from China is safe. You may not like cast iron pans from Asia because of the politics. And if you don't like China because of the politics, you can do that. I'm not going to force politics on you. That's why I started this that's why I started this TikTok live tonight, right now, in fact. I'm sick of all the political crap going on TikTok live. I wanted to do something different. I wanted to just relax and talk about something fun, like cast iron. But as far as Chinese cast iron goes, there's a lot of politics involved for it. I'm only going to say, let me say two things. Boy, am I talking too much or what? But, number one, even if you don't like Chinese cast iron, it's still safe to cook in. You don't have to get it. If you don't want to use Asian cast iron because of political or personal reasons, okay, you can do that. It's your cast iron, whatever you want. But it's still safe to cook in. And the other thing, here's the other thing. If there's a lot of Chinese cast iron out there in those flea markets and thrift stores and Goodwill and Savers and antique malls and all the rest of that. You figure this, if you find an old cast iron pan at a flea market and it's made in China, and you decide to buy that cast iron pan, your money's not going to go to China. It's going to go to the vendor at that booth who sold it to you. I mean, those used pans out there in the U.S. that are out there here in the U.S., you know, again, I don't have any problem with buying and using them for that reason. My money's not going to go to China for that. And so as a result, let me get that one again. And so as a result, I end up with what I think is a nice looking cast iron pan here. It may be made in China. It may have a rough surface. I like the design of this pan, and I'm not ashamed to say so. So nobody's going to be hurt by that, and China's not going to benefit from it either. So, and that is my rant about China, I think. What's it say? I have one purchased, I can't read it very well. Then a couple, it's scrolling up too fast and the text is too small, I'm afraid. Also, I'm kind of far away from my phone. So, but anyway, that's my rant about Chinese cast iron, and that's also my rant about lead. No matter what the subject is, there are always going to be controversial topics about it, no matter what. You talk about chocolate, people will start talking about Nestle and how Nestle is an evil company. You just can't win. So, but on the other hand, there's a lot of fun things about cooking in cast iron, which of course is the whole point, and that's why I got into this hobby in the first place, because I found it was so much fun to cook in cast iron, and I still find it fun to cook in cast iron. Look on my TikTok channel and you'll see I've got a bunch of videos on there. Some talking about cast iron and some talking about cooking in cast iron. I've got a couple of things about cooking chicken in cast iron, for instance, that I would really like people to try, because it's fun and because I think it works great. One is the one that I call cast iron chicken. I'm sure you might have heard of a recipe called chicken under a brick. That's where you put the chicken in a pan and then weight it down with a brick. Well, instead of weighing it down with a brick, heat up another cast iron pan and use that to weigh it down, so that it's being cooked in the cast iron on the top and bottom. That's one thing. So, how do you cook with cast iron? Well, that's easy. You get your pan out onto the stove and you cook with it. Actually, more seriously, it's really not hard. In fact, again, there are 2 million videos out there, and I'm not exaggerating, about people cooking with cast iron, about people cooking eggs in cast iron, and steak, and eggs, and steak, and cornbread, and steak, and chicken, and steak. You get the idea. But if there are 2 pieces of advice I would want to give to somebody who's going to be cooking in cast iron for the first time. Number 1, I would say low and slow. When I first started cooking in cast iron, I turned the temperature up way too high. I blasted my stove to the maximum, and my cast iron got white hot, well, red hot anyway, to the point where when I poured some oil in the pan, it burst into flame just like that. Keep it low and slow. You almost never have any reason to turn your stove top up to more than halfway when cooking in cast iron. If you let your pan heat on the stove for about 10 minutes at medium, it's got to be hot enough to cook a steak, and that'll be fine. And the cast iron will be fine, and you'll have yourself a nice steak. The other thing is again, low and slow, and you'll be able to cook non-stick just about whatever it is, whether it's pancakes or eggs or steak or stir fries. You'll be able to cook it just, again, most of the time low and slow. In some instances, a hot pan will work just fine. You probably need to use a fair amount of oil as well, because the sad fact is that cast iron is not non-stick on its own. I mean, a well-seasoned pan, you only need a tiny bit of oil, but you'll still need oil to get a good nonstick pan. So, but it can certainly be done. Yeah, as Vance says, cast iron is all I cook in. Preheat low and slow. And here's a tip I got from the Frugal Gourmet, if anybody remembers this. This is an ancient Chinese This is an ancient Chinese saying. Hot wok, cold oil, food won't stick. The idea is this. Don't put your oil in the pan right at the beginning and then heat up the oil in the pan. Put your cast iron pan on the stove and heat it dry for a few minutes. After it's gotten good and hot, then add your oil to the pan, wait about a minute or so, and then start cooking. And that's what we mean. Hot wok, cold oil, food won't stick. So yeah, that's a lesson that I used quite a bit. How long have I been talking at this point? I mean, I've just been talking on and on and on. I don't even know how long I've been talking here. I've got to check the time or something. Let me see, because this is not showing on my TikTok here. No sanding. Oh yeah, that is yet another fun subject. By the way, can somebody tell me what time it is? Just post what time it is. But yeah, grinding down cast iron. I am very much against it. And yes, I know there is this guy now on TikTok who is making a name for himself by taking large cast iron pans and polishing them to this beautiful silver mirror finish. It's so smooth, it literally is. It's like a mirror. And I wish he would not do that. It looks great. And I'm sure he says it cooks great. But you don't have to do that. It will work just fine with a pan that you get. You just buy it at Walmart and take it home and cook in it, and it will cook just fine. I cook in my modern day Lodge pans all the time, and there's really no need to grind it down. If you want to grind it down, you can grind it down, but you don't have to. You can cook just fine in any cast iron pan, whether it's vintage or modern, smooth surface or rough surface. And the other thing as well is that leads to people taking vintage cast iron and hitting it with a grinder. And that pretty much ruins any resale or collector's value on that pan. So there's another reason not to grind it. So, man, I miss Arkansas. Was there last month. Oh, that sounds pleasant. 8:07 here in Arkansas. Oh, okay. So in other words, I've been talking on and on for more than an hour now. Yeah. Oh, good grief. But yeah, I mean, I've just been going on and on and on, and I've barely done anything about my collection. But still, I could very well just continue. Well, okay. Let me say as well. I do this every week on YouTube. I've got a YouTube channel, Cast Iron Chaos. And for the past 3 years, I've been going on live on Wednesday night. Wednesday on YouTube is Cast Iron Wednesday. Not just on my channel, but on many YouTube channels. There's a tradition going around on many cooking channels called Cast Iron Wednesday. And it's quite simple. You do something in cast iron on Wednesday. That doesn't exactly take rocket science. And a lot of people make cast iron videos, and I have been doing YouTube live videos every Wednesday night, almost every Wednesday night, for the past 3 years now. So, because it's a lot of fun. So, I can encourage you right now, if you want to visit my YouTube channel, well, you can do so at any time, but you'll see as well that on Wednesday, I go live on YouTube like this on Cast Iron Wednesday. On the other hand, I've enjoyed this, and I would very much like to do this again as well. So, my YouTube is even called, what's it say, Hog Wild, because I'm a hog fan. Oh, you sound like a guy I know on YouTube. There's this guy who calls himself the Deep Fried King, and he's got a channel that he calls the Hog Zone. Yeah, because he certainly does like hunting out wild boars. He loves his pork. He loves his hogs. Well, thank you very much, Vance. I appreciate that. But what can I say? I guess I'll end the way I started. I did this tonight on YouTube, not just on YouTube. I told you, 3 years on YouTube. I did this tonight on TikTok, not just to talk about my hobby. It gave me an excuse to talk about my hobby, but also because I am sick and tired of the political crap that has turned TikTok Live into a wasteland. Just about any other video we're seeing here on TikTok Live is this stupid political stuff going on. And it's all the same thing. People shouting at each other about the same stupid topics over and over and over. Trump 2024. Or trans rights, or abortion, or religion. It's all the same stuff over and over again. I'm sick of it. And tonight I got so sick of it that I decided to just, do something about it and do my own TikTok Live that was not about politics. So, and I managed to waste about an hour of time not having to deal with politics here on TikTok. I talked to you and Mud about the Wagners with the name on the handle. Oh yes, I remember that. I'm still am puzzled as to that one myself. I can only think that must be some unique piece. Cast iron, cast iron, cast iron. Yes, exactly. I'd rather talk about cast iron than more politics. And of course, over the next year and a half, it's only going to get worse. Well, instead of that, just go out and just pull out your cast iron pans and cook something. Because it's more fun. 'Tis the seasoning. Or oh yeah. Something, Tom, it's seasoning. Oh, that's what you said. Okay. And thank you, TikTok. Mine keeps coming out dark brown. Oh, dark brown. That's not a problem. I have seasoned modern cast iron and it's turned out dark brown, and I've seasoned vintage cast iron and it turns out dark brown. That's not a problem. It just seems to happen. I understand it may have something to do with that particular iron make of that particular pan, and it almost differs from one to the other. And all you have to do is cook in that pan. Cook in that pan a few times and it'll turn good and black. So there's nothing to worry about. If it turns out dark brown, it's just fine. Go ahead and cook in it and you won't have any problem at all. So cook potatoes or again, as I said, I'm far away from my phone. Or do more seasoning. Yeah, you could do either one. So I think I would prefer to cook myself. So go ahead and use your iron. I guess that's the last thing I'll say, and then I'll shut up tonight. Go ahead and use your cast iron, folks. You will keep your pans in much better condition if you use them rather than just displaying them and hanging them on the wall. If you've got a collection like mine, it may be difficult to use all of them, but I'm doing the best I can. Don't be afraid of using it. If you've got your great-grandmother's old cast iron pan, get it out and use it. Even if you just want to use it on holidays, like Memorial Day this weekend, for instance. Go ahead and use it. It will last longer that way, unless, of course, there's an accident and you drop it on the floor and break it. But otherwise, it'll be in much better condition. I mean, it won't develop rust spots, and it won't get covered in gunk. So go ahead and use your cast iron, folks. Have fun with it. Cast iron has been making a comeback over the past decade or so, and I love that. And it's a lot of fun, and I love seeing people who are cooking now more than they used to even 10 years ago, because that's a good thing. It saves money, it's healthy, and it's a lot of fun. And especially if you're young as well, it's going to get you on dates too. Believe me, chicks love a guy who cooks. All right, and having said that, I have my grandmother's cast iron and I use it. Well, congratulations, you are doing the right thing. But thank you everybody. Thank you very much for everybody. As I said, I've been droning on for more than an hour now. And I suppose maybe in about a week or so, I might do this again because this has been a lot of fun. I find these live videos to be a lot of fun when I'm interacting with people. You folks watching are what make these so much fun. So thank you very much for stopping by. This is different from your usual TikTok live because no, it doesn't have that political crap. And no, I'm not a jailbait girl either, you know, shaking my thing and trying to get gifts. But fortunately, I do have something that I think I can entertain you with, and that, of course, is all of this cast iron. So I'll show it off again, and we'll do this all again later. So thank you very much, everybody. Have yourselves a good evening, and thank you so much for dropping by. I hope you've enjoyed yourselves. Have a good evening, everybody. Ugh.